If you're not doing pre-production, then you are pre-planning to fail. One of the best things that you can do for your story is to spend some time in pre-production. This week we're going to take a look at a story that I told last year and explore all the different elements of pre-production that helped to make the story a success. Welcome to Smartphone Storytellers, where it's my personal goal to equip you with the skills that you need to tell visual stories using the phone, the smartphone specifically, that you already own. It's week 2 of September is for storytelling, and things have kicked off great. We've already picked a winner for week 1 over on Instagram, but it's a new week, which means that it's not too late to jump over and enter to win this week's swag. Now here on YouTube, this week also means that it's another chance to enter to win the Filmmaking Kit that we're giving away this month. That's consisting of a Rode Wireless Go, an Aputure Amaran 60S, an 80-inch tripod, and an Ulanzi camera grip. All you need to do is like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment to answer the question that I ask in this video. Keep your eyes peeled, it'll come up. Each week's another chance to enter, so make sure you come back for all 4 weeks. You can even go back and enter last week if you didn't already. This week we're diving into pre-production. What's the point? Can't we just grab our camera and start shooting? Sure, you could do that. But you'd be missing a valuable step that's going to help you to identify exactly what you need for your story. Pre-production gives you the chance to think through all the different aspects of your story before you're in a spot where you need to start executing. If you don't do pre-production, you're either going to find yourself trying to figure out your story while you're filming it, or even worse, trying to find the story while you're in the edit. You might still come out with a great story, but you decrease your chances of success. Additionally, you're often going to find that things don't always go to plan on a shoot. Maybe the weather isn't working out, or the B-roll that you plan to capture just isn't working. If you go into a shoot day without a plan, then you're going to be scrambling to both figure out your story while also problem solving the issues that come up. They always do, trust me. If you do pre-production though, then you can approach the day with a plan A, but also be able to keep a plan B and a plan C in the back of your mind. You already know your story, so you're just figuring out what tweaks that you need to make to your plan to make the story happen. Every project's different, but there's a few steps that I like to do when I'm working through pre-production for a story. Not every step happens for every project, but it's worth considering at least each of these to see what's going to help you in your process. Before we dig in too deeply, let's first take a look at the project from last year. This is a project that I produced for an organization called Hope to Home. They recently received an award for their work in the community, and they needed a video to just tell a little bit about what they do and who they help and who they affect.
The mission of Hope to Home Furniture Resource is to deliver furniture and other home goods to those escaping homelessness and other distressed situations who have secured permanent housing. We transform their empty space into a comfortable home. Hope to Home works with veterans as well as women and children escaping domestic violence and human trafficking. We also support 2 prison release organizations. Once housing is secured, we deliver and set up all their furniture needs. It is difficult to describe the joy that providing a furnished, comfortable home brings to both our clients and volunteers. We've had hardened men break down in tears, thanking us for praying over them after we set up their homes. And we've had mothers crush us with hugs and tears after we prayed over their children. The point is that we don't just deliver furniture and home goods. We deliver hope and the blessing that only working, laughing, and praying together in His name can bring to the people that we touch. Over the past 5 years, we've delivered over 1,000 households of furniture, home goods, and hope. Our partners have said that over 95% of the people that we serve have stayed in the home and started a new life. We are furnishing homes for new beginnings.
When I was first approached by Hope to Home, I actually wasn't familiar with the organization. I hadn't heard of them before. The first thing I did was head over to their website to get an idea of a little bit about them. It's important to familiarize yourself with the story in any way you can. Now, if you're telling a story of work that your organization's already doing, that part's pretty easy. You're pretty involved already. I also ended up checking their social media presence to see if I can get an idea of the story, but this was all just to give me an introduction. After that, I set up a pre-interview. The pre-interview can look very different depending on the story that you're telling, but it serves the same purpose either way. It's essentially an informal conversation and an interview to understand all the different elements of your story. In the case of Hope to Home, it was so that I could understand the emotional impact of the work that they were doing. I could find statistics and facts all day long online, but I wanted to understand how their work connected with the people on a deeper level. I typically view the pre-interview as a conversation over coffee, and sometimes it's literally just that. I either meet with them for coffee or we'll jump on a call to talk through the story. I have a few goals in mind when I'm doing this. First is to introduce myself to whoever story I'm telling. I want them to know me as someone who's more than just a filmmaker, but instead as someone who's invested in their story. This is especially important if I'm going to be interviewing a person and having them share their story on camera. They need to be comfortable with me so that when it comes time to sit down in front of that camera, they're more focused on talking with someone who feels more like a friend than a person behind the camera. Secondly, I want to be able to find any details in the story that are going to help me when I go to put everything together. Often I find that details come out in the pre-interview that I had no idea existed, and it only serves to strengthen the story. These are things that if I didn't know about them before the day of the shoot, I might not be able to capture them, and as a result, miss out on sections of the story that are important. Now, you don't want to go too deep in trying to get an emotional response in the pre-interview, as you want to keep some of that fresh for when you're capturing the story on camera. You still want the on-camera interview to have a sense of it being new, like they're telling it for the first time. The pre-interview is a fact-finding time, so you can just keep those things a little bit more shallow and don't need to press too heavily into each moment. Just make sure you're getting the details that you need to understand the story. I like to take bullet point notes as I talk with the person in the pre-interview. This helps me to review those notes later so that I can remember each piece of the story. And then, in the end, I figure out exactly what I want to cover on the actual day of the interview. I then take these notes and outline how I see the final story going. What happens A, then B, then C. And then I write a list of questions from that outline. Not every story is going to have a formal interview though, so in instances where I'm not focusing on telling the story through that interview, I take these notes back and craft a script. With Hope to Home, I actually approach things in a slightly different manner than normal. In talking with the founder, I found that he had a great sense of storytelling, and he knew that the facts that he wanted to make sure came across in the video. He had been telling this story for years, so he already had ironed out some of the best approaches. So I actually had him write out a rough script for his story. I wasn't going to capture him in an interview setting, but I was going to have him do the voiceover. As a result, I wanted to make sure the script had his voice in it. Everyone has a certain way they talk, myself included, a vocabulary that they tend to use, so I wanted to capture this in this script. His first draft was actually pretty solid, and the only issue was that it was a little too long for our intended final product. I told him not to worry about that though, because my plan was to review the script that he wrote and take it to the next step. Structure. Looking at his script, it actually had a really good flow to it. The biggest issue that I found is that there were a few sections that, while they were great information and content, they ended up being somewhat filler for the main story that we were wanting to tell. I needed to evaluate all the different pieces in the story to understand which building blocks were key to our story. There were a few quotes from volunteers that would have worked well if we had that person on camera sharing their story, but since we had him reading the entire script, it made the quotes feel a little out of place. Similarly, there was a client testimony that wouldn't have had the same impact if he was the one delivering it. As a result, I took the main thoughts of these quotes and summed them up in some shorter sentences that made sense coming from the founder. Last week I discussed where were you, where are you now, and where are you going, the structure I like to follow. Looking back at this project, I somewhat wish we had set up the need a little bit stronger to illustrate the where were you portion of the story. I recall him sharing the statistic of how when someone moves into an empty home after coming out of a traumatic situation, they were more likely to fall back into hard times. If they were able to make the place more of a home though, then that statistic fell below 10%. We ended up hitting on this similar quote near the end of the project, but I think it could have been a little bit stronger if the initial need was set up earlier in the video. The current script more so picks up exploring the where are you now scenario by exploring how Hope to Home meets the needs of their clients. Now, it was hard to go too deep into the story in the slightly over 60 seconds that we had allotted for our final video, but I would have loved to go a little bit deeper into the emotional impact on the people that the organization helps. As it is though, it gives a pretty solid idea of what Hope to Home does and the way that they're impacting the community. Now, after crafting a script, it's time to move into the planning for the shoot day. Pre-production isn't over once you script. You need to figure out if there are any other elements that you need for the day of the shoot. Sometimes that's as easy as just confirming the weather for the location and getting your gear all set. Other times, it helps to have a little more information to work with though. That's where you create a shoot plan. I like to create a shoot plan before I head out. This isn't always a formal written out plan, but I at least try to think through all of the shots I want to capture. Shot lists can be as simple as just a list of the elements that you want to capture at the event, or it can be as detailed as the specifics of each type of shot. For Hope to Home, I knew what elements I wanted to capture. I didn't write down a formal plan going into it, but I did at least think through exactly what goes into their outreach. Before leaving the warehouse, I wanted shots of people gathering furniture, loading up the trucks, and smiling people who were interacting with each other and having fun while they were serving. I wanted to get good coverage, so I'd focus on a variety of each of these shots, not just get one of each. We're going to talk more about the actual shoot day later this month, but the important thing is getting a variety of shots. After that, I wanted footage of the actual load-in at the homes, shots of people receiving the furniture, the conversations that happen between the volunteers and those being served, and the moments that illustrate the organization at work. I also captured a little bit of footage of the furniture being restored before it even leaves the warehouse, but we ended up leaving that footage on the cutting room floor to use in future projects. On other projects, you might have some specific shots that you want to make sure you capture to tell your story. If you have a specific shot in mind, it helps to sometimes storyboard those out. This is especially important if you need to communicate the shot to anyone else involved, anyone who's on your team. This helps get the look out of your head so that people can understand what needs to happen. On a project like this, I honestly don't frequently storyboard, just because I'm running solo and I know what I want. But if I'm working with a team and have specific moments that I want captured, a storyboard will then come in handy. After shoot planning, you just need to prep your gear. Gear prep takes place in pre-production because you want to make sure that everything is ready to go before you even leave to go to your set. When filming with a smartphone, you're going to want to make sure that you've got enough space on your phone. You want to make sure you've got a full battery. It may even be helpful to have a USB power brick handy just in case you run out of juice while you're filming, because when you're filming on your phone, it really depletes your battery pretty quickly. If you're capturing audio, you want to make sure that your microphones are all charged and you've got all the pieces you need. It might even help to get everything all rigged together so you know that when you get to the location, everything's ready to go. You just pull it out and start filming. There is nothing worse than getting to a location and realizing a piece of gear isn't ready for the day. Trust me, that has happened to me. Pre-production is important because when it comes to filming, there's a ton of moving parts. Even if you're just capturing B-roll footage, you still need to be aware of the story that you're telling. Otherwise, you might get into the edit bay and realize you didn't capture a piece that you need to effectively tell the story that you want to tell. Approach the shoot day with a willingness to be flexible as things change. Like I said, your plans are going to change. But then make educated decisions on how to best change your plan based on the story that you want to tell and what you've done in pre-production. Now don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and answer this week's question to enter into the Filmmaking Kit giveaway. This week's question is, what was your biggest takeaway from this week's video? What's the biggest thing you learned? See you guys next week.